And hello and aloha and to Think Tech Hawaii. Today we have an exciting program about where we are with energy. We have a special guest calling in from Big Island. You've heard him before, Marco Mangelsdorf with PV Solar. And he is going to tell us about what's happening from NExtEra merger to where solar is going and where we're going with the legislature this coming session, which opens January 20th. And also I'm pleased to have Keith Cronin from SunHedge here, and he's been on many times as well, and he's the counterpart here in Honolulu talking about solar and what's happening globally maybe, as well as impacts on Hawaii. So welcome everybody. We're going to start off with hearing about the NExtEra merger. All of you have heard about what's happening, not that slide yet. You have heard about what's happening over at the PUC hearing, the Public Utilities Commission hearing, and it's just finished up its first round of about 10 or 11 sessions, and they are going to take a break and come up for the second round. But I'd like to hear from Marco, who's been intimately involved, about what's happening or what happened and where we are now at the end of round one. Marco?
Well, a warm aloha to the two of you. It's always a pleasure to be on Think Tech with you, Sharon, and to be on with my different brother of a different mother, comrade in arms, Keith Cronin. So great to be with the two of you. Yeah, we are now in the kind of hiatus after the first round of hearings on the docket, the merger docket between NExtEra Energy out of Florida and Hawaiian Electric Industries, the parent company of HECO, HELCO, and MECO. They wrapped up this past Wednesday in Honolulu. I had a chance to be there at the opening 2 days, and I was able to be there in the final 2 days and kind of bookend to the 12 days worth of hearings, which saw a parade of about a dozen witnesses from the applicants being NExtEra and Hawaiian Electric. And we are going to be waiting for round two if Chairman PUC Chair Randy Iwase stated on Wednesday that he was looking to schedule the next round February 1 through 10, the 1st through the 10th of February back at the Blaisdell. So we'll see if that holds true.
So this is going on for a long time, right, Marco? So it's not just, this is just sort of opening round is just the opening round. Tell us a little bit more what's planned for those different rounds. So I guess it's one now, January, then February. A little bit of overview on what that process is.
Well, we have the applicants finishing up their testifying, their cross-examinations. In other words, they're being cross-examined by the consumer advocate Jeff Ono's group, by the interveners, of which there are now 24 out of original 29. There are 24 left, and then also questioned by the chief counsel of the PUC, Tom Gorak, a really fantastic questioner, and the commissioners themselves, Randy Iwase, the chair, Mike Champley, and Lorraine Akiba. So the applicants are for the most part done. The next round is going to be the witnesses, few more witnesses from the applicants, and then witnesses from the consumer advocate, which I don't have the exact number, probably somewhere in the 5 to 6 or 7 range. And then those witnesses will be questioned by the attorneys from NExtEra and Hawaiian Electric. And then after the consumer advocate has his witnesses on the stand, then the applicants have made clear that they intend to cross-examine virtually all of the witnesses from the 24 remaining interveners. I believe the only ones they won't question will be folks from AES. So they'll be questioning witnesses from 23, I believe, out of the 24 interveners. So that'll be round two. And so just kind of take a step back, Sharon. Mm-hmm. Why are these evidentiary hearings taking place? They're taking place to allow the commission to develop as full and complete a record as possible on this rather momentous decision that's before them in terms of one of the most oldest and most venerable companies in the state that is being purchased or seeks to be purchased, seeks to sell to NextEra-HEI out of Juneau Beach, Florida. So it's all part of developing a public record and having the maximum amount of input and discussion and debate over the merits of the merger as it is proposed. So that's kind of the why behind the whole thing. So it's all to provide the commission, the three commissioners, the basis for which to make an informed decision as to whether this is in the best interest of the state's residents in the state of Hawaii or not.
And so far as it's going, do you think that there's enough input from the interveners so that in fact it is a broad record that's being framed and it's covering all the commitments and so forth that NextEra and HECO are proposing or have proposed? Do you think that it's full coverage so far?
I would have to say yes, Sharon. I'd have to say yes. I'd say there are about 10 or so interveners who are regular participants. I mean, again, for the record, my group, the Hawaii Island Energy Cooperative, is one of the interveners, and we are seeking to put forth the possibility or the merits of a cooperative, electric cooperative here in the Big Island, similar to what took place on Kauai 12, 13 years ago. So there are about 10 or so interveners who are regular participants. The other 12 or more haven't really showed up much or haven't participated directly. So there's kind of a hardcore group of about 10 of us, 10 interveners. And the questions that have been asked, I think, for the most part, have been very good. I think the questions that Jeff Ono and his team have posed have been very good. And I think Tom Gorak, again, representing the commission themselves, have asked very good questions. Let me kind of share with you a couple of principal takeaways out of these weeks of hearings, because while I haven't been there the whole time, I've been able to watch a fair amount through Olelo Community TV. And there are kind of two kind of poignant moments that really stand out to me. One is when one of the lead people from NextEra, Eric Gleason, who's kind of headed up their efforts here these past months and this past year or so, Eric Gleason had been on the stand for almost 3 full days. And Randy Iwase, because the sequence is that the commissioners essentially go last as far as asking the witnesses on the stand. They're asking them questions. So Gleason had been up for almost 3 days, and Randy Iwase was posing questions to Mr. Gleason. And at one point, he looked at Mr. Gleason and he said, "Why should we trust NextEra?" And I found that to be a very, very penetrating, certainly unexpected question. And I thought Eric did as good a job as he could with the question that I don't think he was probably expecting. So I found that question and then the answer by Eric to be quite interesting. And then the other takeaway...
So what was his answer? No, yes. So what did he say and what did you think about his answer?
Well,
were you
I don't
convinced
remember
that
his
you
answer.
can trust them?
I don't remember his answer verbatim, Sharon, but it was along the lines of, give us a chance, we'll earn your trust. Give us a chance, we'll earn your trust. And then the other poignant moment just happened on Wednesday, and again, this closed out 12 days of hearings when Randy Iwase was questioning the top NextEra employee who had been in attendance for these hearings, and that is their CFO, their Chief Financial Officer and Vice Chairman, one Maury Dewhurst. And Dewhurst had been on the stand for close to 2 days, and I thought Dewhurst was really a very, very good, very solid witness. And Randy Iwase got to the issue of a trust again. I think as far as how well can NextEra be trusted to take care of the HECO employees, and not just the HECO employees, because there's been talk about layoffs at some point beyond the 2 years of guaranteed no layoffs. But where Iwase really drilled into was the lack of a specific commitment on the part of NextEra to take care of the kupuna, to take care of retirees. And he actually did a little lecture, Randy did, on the meaning of kupuna beyond just the standard our grandparents, our elders, and so forth. And I found that it was to me kind of an electrifying moment in the room, and personified, really exemplified the apparent skepticism based on that line of questioning from Chair Iwase, the apparent skepticism about some of the commitments or lack of adequate commitments, binding commitments from NExtEra. So those are kind of the two of the poignant moments of the course of 12 days of hearings that stood out to me.
Keith, you have any questions of Marco of what he's heard or what's happened during the last 10, 11 days of the hearings?
Well, I think we both talked about some of this stuff. We had it over dinner recently, and I think the utility is definitely having a difficult time, I think, convincing the Public Utility Commission that this is a great idea. I think, as Marco just quite simply pointed out, is that there's a lot of questions about trust and integrity, and we see this happen a lot. I think even when my company was acquired, almost 7 years ago, there's always that, you're going to do the right thing. So I think that comes up a lot in Hawaii for companies that are coming to Hawaii to buy entities, and as Marco pointed out, this is the oldest business in the country, in our state. So you have a big mainland firm trying to buy a local firm, and I think we heard some sarcasm, I think, in the newspaper the day about whether this is a little snack, so whether that personifies ego, I don't know, or whether it was kind of context, I don't know, but I think to me, clearly, there's lots of questions about trust, and again, back to Marco saying about Kapuna, what's going to happen to people that are in their retirement, that has been discussed a lot. There's lots of conjecture about how much they're really saving, what does that really mean? So I think it's good, and I think on the flip side, you have NExtEra saying, hey, we're the only ones, we're the only suitors, so it's kind of like a dating thing where I'm going to date you, Sharon, hey, I'm the only guy in town.
Right.
So we need to decide, is Sharon going to say, hey, is Keith the only guy, right? So I think they're having a difficult time with that, and I think the PUC has this is probably their most difficult decision.
The biggest decision,
yeah,
for sure.
in their existence, just like it is for the state. And I think the biggest problem, I think, that we're all seeing as an industry, meaning energy industry, is probably it's been upended. I've talked about this a lot. This is pretty much like Netflix being upending the cable industry or Uber.
Cell phone industry before,
Yeah. So we're seeing lots of change. Yeah, so it's how do you manage this and how do you do what's right for the people? Because the Public Utility Commission, as the name sounds, they're here to do what's in the best interest of the people of Hawaii. So they have their work cut out for them. And then who's next?
So if you were on the commission, I think the balancing is what is the interest of the public versus sort of an old organization that needs to be, coming into the present with technology and with, I guess they're calling it transforming the organizational culture, but not losing sight of the environment, the Hawaii's culture and its respect for the seniors, or respect for employees or people and the culture. I mean, how does that, what would be the balance on what questions would really be incisive enough to be able to, okay, I got it, it's more pro than con. I mean, do you have any feeling for that, you and Marco, on what would be some of the criteria? What would you look at?
Well, I think change is permanent, right? So no matter what we do in our lives, we have to look at, we could all go back to when we were 12 or when we were 20 and say, I want things to be the way they always were. But clearly that's not how life really works. And I think we have an old institution, and it is kind of like a government institution. People talk about Hawaiian Electric all the time, right? And we also have to look at, if we look at history and look at the past, they've actually made some decisions years ago to try and be more, I would say, entrepreneurial. And it hasn't worked out very well. If everyone wants to go look at, Bob Clark's days as the CEO and what they've tried to do outside of Hawaii. So there might be even within the culture of the organization a difficulty to make change because there's fear of the unknown, right? So, but moving forward, like every organization, it's just you have to be a little more entrepreneurial. And I think that's what they're trying to do. They're signaling to the marketplace, hey, we want change, we need to change. We don't have the financial ability to do that. When you look at Moody's ratings or Fitch and you look at, NExtEra has they can borrow money cheaper. So they're selling us on, hey, we can help you. Just like when my situation, when I had a growing solar company, it was like, hey, I knew I hit a ceiling on my ability to raise capital, right, as an example. So a big company came in and said, hey, we can help you with that because we can reach more people. So I really empathize and understand because I had like a little mini HECO. So I understand the relationship. It's never easy because there's always trade-offs, right? You're going to give up control. I know they talked about the board seats and whether Alan's going to be on one of the board seats or Connie, and I think there's lots of uncertainty around this. So I don't have a perfect answer for it. I think it's a very difficult decision for them culturally and getting the right deal, because we all know whenever a deal's done and then what happens after the deal, sometimes things change. So I really truly empathize with their situation, but they also know they need to change. So they're between a rock and a proverbial hard place.
And Marco, any thoughts on that? And what's the essence of, having a good decision for Hawaii?
Well, I thought right before Randy Awase asked the questions to Maury Dewhurst late Wednesday afternoon, Commissioner Mike Champley preceded him, and I thought Mike asked also a number of good questions, one of them being essentially, okay, we have these so-called commitments that 85 of them supposedly that have been provided by NextEra as kind of benchmarks that we promised or we vow to. I'm not sure what exact verb that they would use in terms of honoring the commitments. And Mike essentially said, how are we supposed to, we're acting in the best interest of the state. We have to, right? That's our reason for being here. How are we to measure? What kind of metrics are we to use as measuring to see how well you are doing if we were to vote to approve, if you were to take over, take the keys to the kingdom, so to speak? How are we to judge? How are we to measure how good a job you're doing? And
okay,
I thought
hold that thought, and we're going to come back to you, Marco. Just a short little intermission here. But hold that thought. We're going to come back to what the answer was. Okay.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen, host of Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii. Come join us every Friday at 2 p.m. when I interview interesting scientists about what they do, why they do it, and why we should all care about it. It's a lot of fun to see. And you can learn interesting stuff. You'll hear all kinds of fascinating science, and we know you'll have a great time. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized right here on Think Tech. Aloha.
Hello. We're back again with Think Tech Hawaii's energy program on what's happening at PUC, but what's happening in the state and the federal levels as well. And with me is Marco Mangelsdorf calling in from the Big Island with Provision, and also Keith Cronin here with SunHedge. So welcome back. And we were just discussing with Marco the cliffhanger question and what the results were on where NextEra's answer is from the PUC. Marco, you want to continue on and let us know what the answer is? Or was?
Sure. The question that Mike Champley asked Maury Dewhurst on Wednesday was, how are we to measure progress being made on these commitments of yours? And Dewhurst did the best job he could, but ultimately it is a real challenge. I mean, to come up with exact metrics as far as, okay, a party such as NextEra is vowing to do A through Z, and how do you measure their progress on achieving these commitments? So it's there is a pining, I think, as a species that we have for greater certainty, right? Because uncertainty we've been dealing with, of course, from the moment we enter this earth or come on this earth, that we'd like to make things more predictable, more understandable, and give us a greater sense of security. But when something is as big as in our little state, having one of the oldest and most venerable companies essentially taken over by a company 4,800 miles away, there's a fair amount of uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to anxiety and concern. So I think that is kind of the backdrop of much of the past several months in the past year throughout the press and the media, amongst various parties who are interested in this, is what would come next if this company far, far away from us were to take over one of the most important companies in the state of Hawaii. And no one has the definitive answer to that. And ultimately, the commission, assuming that they reach that point, the commission will have to make a very weighty decision, yea or nay, on it.
Well, and I think in terms of the question being, how much uncertainty can you live with? And what does that, in the long term, how do you safeguard against like larger risks than the public's willing to bear?
Yeah, this is truly kind of the great unknown, Sharon. It's the great unknown, and I wonder sometimes if the folks, the brain trust at NExtEra, as they were deciding whether to make a play on Hawaiian Electric in mid 2014, whether if they had known now, if they knew then what they know now in terms of the terrain out here, the regulatory terrain, the political terrain, the cultural terrain, whether they still would have made the same decision. Of course, that's a rhetorical question. One will never know, but I think it's a fair observation to make that they really could not have known what they were really getting into here in this beautiful Aloha state in the Pacific.
Right, not to the extent that they're facing now. I think they were here before with a power purchase power agreement, but not to the extent that they're in it now. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a good question. Well, let's move on to the. You had a chart that you sent to us on the oil and gas prices, and what would the impact on that be on the merger? But for Hawaii in general, if you can tell us what this chart says. Well, it's very obvious, but you want to talk about it a little bit, Marco?
Sure, and then I'll be glad to hand it over to Keith because I know he has some important observations as well to make. Well, I was quoted in a piece that came off Civil Beat this past over the weekend, written by Eric Pape, and the point I made is that back in 2014, the price of oil was between $100 essentially, a little over 100 to around 60 about a year ago. And you can see there on the chart that's on the screen right now, and clearly oil has gone down substantially from where it was averaging in 2014 to it closed today at even below $34.73 a barrel. It closed at $34.66. So is that a lot? No, it's not. But still, it's a continuing downward trend to pricing that hasn't been seen before since 2002 and before. So would it have made a difference if oil was trading at $30 to $40 a barrel in 2014 in terms of NExtEra's calculus and whether they're going to make a play on Hawaiian Electric or not? And I think that while it wasn't perhaps a major factor or the most important factor, I think a case can be made that one of NExtEra's cards in their hand, so to speak, is that they claim that they will, quote, lower energy costs, unquote, lower energy costs. That's part of their marketing wrap and has been for months here. So when prices for energy here are higher, I think people are feeling the pain more acutely in terms of the money that comes out of their pocket, not just for electric bills, but also at the gas pump. So now that we're seeing lower energy prices over the past months, and who knows how low they're going to go, how much lower they're going to go, and where they're going to park, where they're going to stabilize, if they are going to stabilize, the pain of paying your electric bill and the pain of filling up your vehicle is a little bit mitigated at this point with lower energy costs. So perhaps the fact that energy costs, both again at the pump and through our electric bills, that they have come down. Maybe that takes a little bit of the edge off or the appeal off of the pitch that NExtEra is making. So that's again, I'm simplifying things here probably to an over extent, but I think it's an interesting calculus that if oil had been $30-40 a barrel in 2014, would HEI still be such a juicy target for an acquisition?
I'm going to add to that, Keith.
Yeah, I think that Marco makes some great points about the price of oil, and I think that is the metric we've used for a long time. Marco and I have been in the solar business a long time, as well as many others. But I think maybe what I'm going to go out on a limb and say is maybe the metric needs to change. President Obama's staying in Kailua, where I live. It's kind of nice to see him coming here every year after 8 years and kind of being a local guy or a local boy, like he said in Paris at this climate accord. I look at the beach in Kailua eroding. So I think people argue a lot about climate change. My simple theory is and feeling is that we live on this little globe in the middle of the atmosphere here, and it's getting hotter because there are more people on the planet. So maybe the metric needs to change, meaning, Marco talks about the price of oil, and anybody that's selling solar or selling natural gas, selling this commodity, we've always tried to mirror that, whatever the price of oil is, and we're saying, hey, this is the payback, it's X amount of years. So maybe that metric needs to change. And quite often at the legislature, I've seen you there for all these years, I've been going down there for too long, and we always talk about these externalities, excuse me. So what is the real value of not releasing stuff into the atmosphere, right? And even heard Governor Ige say, you know what, the bridge to nowhere, this idea of using natural gas or some other form of gas, mooring that off of the coast of the west side of the island is going to be part of the answer. I agree with him. It's not really the answer. We're still trading one fossil fuel for another, right? We're still burning something. So I think maybe the metric needs to change.
And what kind of metric do you think would help us get there? Because with the Paris Accord and all that's happening now, the conversation is global, and we can say, oh well, it doesn't affect Hawaii because we're just sort of in the middle of the ocean, and it's far away from everything, most vulnerable. We should be doing something, but we're not going to make a difference in the world. How might we create a metric that would impact and show at least that we are doing something? What might that be?
I think we're on that path. I think we're on the renewable path. I see a future where there's maybe a pallet of some kind of storage device outside of everybody's home. I mean, Hawaiian Electric has 454,000 or so residential bills, right? So it's residential homeowners that are on their system. Now, if everybody had one of those pallets at the side of their house and they rate base the cost of this versus running a cable between islands, we would make power where we use it. And if you look back at the history of electricity, when Thomas Edison first made a grid in Lower Manhattan, it was DC before Tesla turned to AC, but it was a small grid. So you had a bunch of these small concentric grids. It's kind of parallel to us being on the internet today. There was this big mainframe, and then we went back to the PC. Now we're going back to this cloud-based stuff. So I think if we look at kind of the power grid like the internet, where I have power at my house, and let's just say you're at work and I'm home and I'm making power and you need power, or somebody in the next street needs power, we're going to send them power. I think the utility of the future really becomes a toll booth operator per se. But we're all part of the problem, right? You asked that global question, like how can we make a difference? I think we have to lead here. We have to demonstrate that we can do this in a small market. There's an island off of Portugal, El Tierra Fuego. They actually have an island where it's all powered by hydro and wind and solar. So we can do it here at the scale we're doing at. But when we look back at Hawaiian Electric, by doing all this solar, what we've done is really eroded their business model. They're in a cost-plus business. Let's think about it in its real simplistic form, right? They buy oil, they buy coal, and they mark it up, right? And they make money, right? Or they create a capital expenditure. But if you read their 10K, they're going to supposed to spend $600 or $700 million in the coming year on capital expense to upgrade the transmission distribution line. So what if we took that money and did kind of what I'm just describing, is basically making power use it, right? And storing it there. And I think we'd also create more resiliency within the grid. So these are really hard questions to talk about, to open up a docket, to do this and to investigate it. It's going to take time, but when we look at the governor saying, hey, this isn't really the direction we want to go, I think we're going to head down that road as an island state. And I think it's a model for everywhere.
Something to think about. Marco, you have anything to add to that, or you want to talk about other options? Your thoughts?
Well, I think Keith made a lot of great points, and this island, this beautiful chain of islands out here, we have been, we will continue to be for at least a number of years or decades, still heavily dependent on imported fossil fuels to power our economy, to keep the lights on, to keep vehicles on the road, to keep inter-island travel both in the air and over water to make that possible. And with oil being as cheap as it is, natural gas being as cheap as it is, it creates a number of opportunities, and one cannot pursue every opportunity with the same amount of gusto. So it's very important that we have an in-depth discussion amongst the stakeholders, both in the regulatory arena and the political arena, to come up with a path which is going to get us to the promised land sooner and more cost effectively than later. And then, easier said than done, of course. The way I put it is incredibly simplistic. But that's truly what we have before us, because, we all believe, I think, or the vast majority of us believe, that greater energy security, greater independence here in our isolated island chain is a paramount concern, a paramount priority. And how we get there is going to be a continuing drama. There are always going to be issues that come up, Sharon, whether it's a playmate on Hawaiian Electric, whether it's Should we go LNG? Should we stick with oil? Should we maybe have more natural gas but not compress it a la LNG? I mean, we're truly an experiment out here in becoming more sustainable, more energy independent, and ultimately doing our very small part but important part in trying to reduce our carbon footprint on this planet and make the world a little better place.
Yes. Okay. On that really positive note, we will take a short break and we'll be right back. Thank you, Marco. Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Hi, I'm Stan, the Energy Man, Stan Osterman, and I'm here to tell you about my show on Friday, every Friday, on my lunch hour, 12 o'clock till 1 o'clock here on Think Tech Hawaii. We talk about everything energy and anything you ever wanted to know about energy. So we're full of energy, and we'll see you here every Friday at noon to 1. Aloha.
And welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii. Marco and Keith and I are talking about energy and the energy future for Hawaii. I'm going to lead off. I think Marco ended. Thank you. And now we'll go to Keith, and you can tell us a little bit more about the bigger picture and what does it mean for Hawaii, the federal tax incentives, the convention, what's happening.
Well, I think a lot has changed in regard to Friday. You know, we always talked about having this tax extender bill for maybe 2 years to kind of wean ourselves off of the tax credit, and there's been lots of discussion, you know, nationally as well as locally, as whether we need it anymore, whether we don't need it. You know, do we follow what the oil industry's done? So we're all surprised this week when the House and the Senate both passed this, and obviously the governor's going to sign, the president's going to sign this. But so what does it mean globally, and what does it mean locally? And I think with the impending quote-unquote doom of 2016 coming and this big rush to get projects built, and there's a lot of scrambling going on. So I kind of analogize it to farming. There was a lot of harvesting that was going to come next year, but a lot of seeding. So there weren't going to be a lot of future sales made, because once this tax credit evaporated, it really changed the business, right? I mean, it went down to 10% on commercial, but I think it really was going to impact the market. And then, as Marco pointed out, when we look at the price of oil, people are always using that as a benchmark to look at what the return on their investment is. So moving forward, I think it's going to do a lot of things, and I think they're going to be positive. They might not be immediately positive in Hawaii, but I'll just describe some, because when you have the utilities saying, hey, 25 meg cap, once we hit that, we're kind of done. But I think what it's going to do for innovation and technology in regard to looking at how we're going to make storage become part of the future, I think that's really what the exciting thing is. So, and with most businesses, right, when you're trying to do any kind of economic stimulus, you're trying to figure out a way, how can we have a business that's more than 2 years or 1 year, right?
Long term.
Yeah, something long term. So this is really giving the industry 5 more years to think about how do we integrate storage, how do we integrate, you know, the software, how do we integrate, you know, non-firm energy like solar, wind, wave, and whatever comes. So I'm personally and professionally very excited about that, because it's giving the investment community, it's giving Wall Street a connection to Main Street.
So just sort of for the audience, what does it cover? So the incentive is for solar, but it's also for other renewable energy kinds of technologies, as well as what does it cover beyond, you know, getting solar?
Well, as it was originally set up, again, they just did an extension. And there's a couple little caveats, and I don't want to bore you with all the little details, but essentially it extended what was already existing. So if you're doing wave, solar, wind, different things like that, but I'm just focusing mostly on solar in this talk, but essentially the 30% tax credit was going to go down to 10% for commercial projects, and for residential it was going to go down to 0. So there's a lot of lobbying going on saying, hey, you know, the business just got off the ground. We talked about all the job creation, again, this climate accord. So I think it was kind of a confluence of activities that actually made Congress, and again, back to the give and take in Congress, what a lot of people don't really understand too on the give and take side was Republicans are now able to, for the first time in 40 years, be able to allow oil companies in the United States to export oil.
Crude.
So for
Crude
them,
oil.
it was a great benefit.
And so in terms of the 5-year extension, it's just an extension. It doesn't taper off. It's just 5 years there.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of provisions on tapering off and when you can start construction, which was the other part of the real problem, was that when the tax credit was set up, there was no work at the federal level to figure out how do you deal with an off-ramp, right? It was this kind of a cliff that dropped right off. So they set up some provisions in there for you have to start construction by such and such a date, right? So they've recognized that were the kind of flaws, or they didn't have the vision in the past to look at what the future's going to be like in 2016. I don't think anybody, could have looked back. Yeah, I mean, how it mushroomed, right? And I think it mushroomed for a lot of reasons. Even the world financial crisis created a huge mushroom in the solar industry because we were able to monetize the tax credit. So for a few years with the American Recovery Investment Act, we were able to take the 30% credit and actually get cash, which I think was part of the fuel that actually made the business grow. And as Marco had in the slide there, when oil was high, it was the perfect storm for the industry. But moving forward, I think, again, this is giving a local perspective and a global perspective to, hey, we really want this stuff more. As I touched upon earlier, Obama was just up in Alaska, and he did a show this week, and it talked about climate change and receding ice, the glaciers. So I think this is sending a clear signal to the industry that we want more of this stuff, and irrespective of who gets into the president's office in 2017, I think
it's
we're
not going to turn around.
Yeah, it's not. I think we're on the right path to creating, again, innovation, whether it be the iPhone in your pocket. This is kind of a parallel to that, where we'll be able to put technology in our pockets or empower you to have the power in your own house to do what you want to do or in your business, which is really exciting.
Marco, you want to add to that?
Well, I'll add that, my other hat, other than being a small business owner in the solar industry, is that I'm a political scientist as well. I teach this stuff. I've taught it at both University of Hawaii Hilo and also University of California. And I was stunned. I was really stunned last week when this news of a 5-year extension of the investment tax credit came down the pike. I was not expecting it. I don't have my ear to the ground in Washington, D.C., as some of the national solar players do, but I was truly amazed that in a Republican Congress with very substantial majorities in both houses of Congress, and with the backdrop of, in the past several years, more overt hostility and suspicion on the part of some across the political spectrum on the Republican side towards renewable energy, that the Republican-controlled Congress passed not just a 2-year extension, but a 5-year extension. So it just goes to show that when it comes to predicting politics, even people with advanced degrees in political science can get it very, very wrong, as I did. So I think it's a real relief to thousands, tens of thousands of people in the industry, from manufacturers to installers to consultants, that this happened. I think it was a very, 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 very good thing because and perfect timing with what went down in Paris at the climate talks. So I'm very pleased and very relieved that at least for the next handful of years we'll still have a substantial federal tax incentive in the form of a tax credit to promote both businesses and homeowners going small, medium, and large-scale solar.
It seems like the tipping point has tipped, and at least in the federal level and in Hawaii, we've been pretty much out there. In terms of the incentives in Hawaii, does the federal incentive now impact on what we do here? Kind of moving into where the next session will take us, but we've all had that discussion on whether incentives were necessary because we're really going full force. We've really created the market. It's going forward. People really want it. Is there a need for an incentive? What are your thoughts on what the impacts on the federal incentives are on where we go in Hawaii?
Well, I think it can go a bunch of different ways. In the New York Times last week, there was an article about coal in China, and I know it's hard to believe the amount of people, but we just said that they laid off about 100,000 people, in northern China, which is right near Russia. So there's such a demand out there, and as Marco pointed out, this is going to create 5 years of demand for renewable energy. So how does it impact locally, and how does it impact the next legislative session? I think it sends a clear message to the environmental committees, and obviously Ways and Means and Finance are always the big ones, right? The ones that basically decide how to write this check, just like what we saw at the federal level. But I think it really sends a signal for a lot of innovation coming. I mentioned this earlier, right? So Now, whether we have another tax credit that's going to deal with storage, right? Because we always have to look at life as like problems and solutions, right? So over the last few years, anybody that's followed the solar industry in Hawaii has recognized that the utility had to slow down the industry because they had all this non-firm generation on their system. And it's problematic, right? Because we have an old infrastructure, we don't have places, we don't have another state to send it to. So hopefully in this session, I'm not trying to purvey good news, but I think what's going to happen is that the legislators are going to say, okay, well, how do we solve this problem, right? Because HECO has this problem. So whether it be rate-basing storage, or that's probably take a long time, but creating a storage credit. And as we've seen even in the industry, I mean, we have Department of Taxation involved, right? It's not just the legislature, right? And as I look at the industry has evolved and morphed over time, there's different mechanisms that they've used to measure how do we define a system, and then how does the tax credit apply to that. So I think moving forward, I hope to see that we're going to basically create independence. And Marco brought up something really interesting, which I read also in the New York Times about Republicans and being able to see, hey, why would we incentivize renewables? But even Republicans, at a very simplistic level, they realize this is about independence and about freedom, right? So it sounds kind of really unusual when you think about, renewable energy and a Republican. But also we can say, hey, Governor Linda Lingle is a Republican, look what she did for the renewable energy industry, right? So I'm excited moving forward through the new legislative session that we'll see some exciting bills come up, again, to solve this problem. I really think it is a problem that, again, I think Marco can probably quote me, or he can, tighten up this quote, but I think it's about 74,000 people that have solar in Hawaii, which is great. But we have another 454,000, right, that don't have it. So we have the highest penetration in the country, which is great. We should all be proud of that issue, but I don't think we should stop there.
So I guess the problem that's been brought up with solar is that, you have only the 74,000, and yet, how do you address the equity issue? Those who don't have it, are they subsidizing those who do? And I know Marco has had a lot of discussion about that, or thoughts about that. And I don't know, Marco, how do you see that? How do we, assure that the whole state benefits?
Well, I don't have it in my power, my very limited power to have the whole state benefit at this point in my life. Maybe I can always hope for something more miraculous.
Well, something closer to the whole state, maybe not the whole state.
Yeah. But I kind of taken a step back. I mean, I think it's highly unlikely that there's going to be any move on the part of this legislature to ramp down the state tax credit, especially in light of the PUC ruling back on October 13th, October 12th, that net energy metering was being brought to an abrupt close on the 13th, by the 13th of October, which has caused some in the industry to yell very loudly that they find this to be unjust and not right, and something NEM should be continued seemingly in perpetuity. But the bottom line is a small business owner in solar that, as I anticipated, after net energy metering was brought to a close. Sorry?
You've got a minute, so tell us quickly.
Yeah, so to wrap it up, I don't believe that there's going to be any effort, any credible effort to try to ramp down or bring to a close the state tax credit, renewable energy tax credit, and apparently probably there will be a significant amount of movement to try to get battery storage included, so that people who put batteries in on their home or their facility will be able to get perhaps as much as 35% state tax credit off of battery storage.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Marco, for joining us, and Keith, and from Think Tech Hawaii. Happy holidays, and we'll see you again next week. Aloha.